the Kent City School District Board of Education September meeting. Roll call members, please.
Mr. Rush?
Yes.
Ms. Stryker?
Yes.
Mr. Watkins?
Yes.
Mr. Albert?
Yes.
Mr. Carmine?
Yes.
Pledge allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Item 3, approval and/or correction of the minutes of the regular meeting on August 20th, 2018. Do I have a motion?
Stryker.
Do I have a second?
Watkins.
Watkins. Any discussion? Vote.
Ms. Stryker?
Yes.
Mr. Watkins?
Yes.
Mr. Albert? Mr. Carmine?
Yes.
Mr. Rush?
Yes. Okay. 4, principal admin reports. We're going to start off with curriculum. Judy Cole.
Good evening. In a few minutes, you're going to hear all 3 of our buildings present their goals and plans for the year. So my presentation is going to be pretty brief. I'm just going to kind of highlight some of the things that we're doing district-wide that you should hear in common in all of those presentations. The first thing I want to talk about is our academic goal, which is improving core instruction, our Tier 1 instruction. And we identified that goal a couple of years ago, and we've been working on that for a while. And one of the things that we did last year was we identified 3 critical components of core instruction so that everybody in the district had a common understanding of what we meant by core instruction. And then we took those 3 elements and we tried to, tie everything together with those 3 elements. So the first thing that we want to do to continue improving core instruction this year is to review and update those 3 critical components, just making sure that we still agree that those are the critical components, and then making any changes or revisions to that we need to. And then we've also kind of discovered through the process of working on core instruction that we may need to more clearly define what we mean by core instruction or Tier 1 instruction, the who and the when that core instruction occurs, because there seems to be maybe some disconnect between interventions that we provide during core instruction and then interventions that are outside of that Tier 1 instruction. So we're going to be putting together some definitions of exactly what core instruction, when that occurs, so that we can achieve our goal of making sure that 80% of all of our students in the district are successful without interventions. So the idea of core instruction is that you get 80% of your kids to be, proficient with your standards and not needing any other interventions. So we need to make sure that that's clearly defined. The next step that we're going to take district-wide would be to align all of our PD to our district goals. And Mrs. Penzarski has worked on the strategic plan. We've all worked on the strategic plan. We have 5 district-wide goals, and we now have a spreadsheet of all of the district PD that will happen throughout the year. And all of those PDs need to be aligned to one of those 5 strategic goals. And they're all nice and color-coded and labeled so that we know, is this a supports PD? Is it an academic core instruction PD? Is it an intervention PD? So all of that is aligned to make sure that we are really focusing on those strategic goals of the district. The next thing that kind of ties into that is making sure that we appropriately use differentiation strategies in all classrooms. So when we talk about core instruction, one of the things that we want to make sure that we do is differentiate instruction so that all of our students in that core Tier 1 instruction have their needs met where they are, and they don't need intervention after that. So differentiation is one of the ways, one of the strategies that we can use to make sure all of those students' goals and needs are being met. So we're working on some district-wide PD. We have a great speaker coming in on October 8th to work with all of our staff, and she will be talking about some differentiation activities that can help students in the classroom. And those PDs will be held hopefully then in the spring as well. We can work on more differentiation PD. The reason we want to take a look at differentiation is we want to make sure that all of our students are getting at least 1 year's worth of growth on their achievement scores so that we can improve what we do instructionally for all of our kids. Another strategy or step that we're using to improve core instruction is the use of the ProCore short cycle assessments this year. And we kind of struggled in the past with bringing assessment data to the table. Our teacher-based teams and our building leadership teams and our district leadership team really kind of got together and said that we need some assessments that are aligned to state standards that we can have conversations about, so that we can give these short cycle assessments and know where our kids are, so that we know who needs what in that Tier 1 instruction. So we are going to be using those ProCore assessments to help improve that TBT, BLT, and DLT process of talking about standards and data, and then hopefully teachers will then use that data to guide their instruction and help meet kids where they are. And again, get that year's worth of growth that we're, at least a year's worth of growth that we're looking for all of our students. And finally, the last goal here or step that we will take for district-wide core instruction is to continue with our vertical alignment discussions and bridging instructional gaps that happen between grade levels and even between buildings. So improving communication between teachers in grade levels and buildings. That started last year with math and ELA. We had a lot of vertical alignment discussions where we would bring groups of teachers together, like K through 7 teachers, and then 6 through 12 teachers, so that we had teachers represented in different buildings as well. That was a very positive experience for a lot of our teachers because they don't necessarily always have time to communicate with each other to see, make sure what's happening in 6th grade is going to help out the 7th grade teacher and vice versa. So we started that in math and ELA last year, and we're going to continue that in science and social studies this year because the state revised the state standards in science and social studies. Those are new, and they were adopted in February, and we are supposed to start implementing those over the next couple of years. So those vertical alignment discussions are going to continue district-wide with those subjects, and you're going to hear a lot of things in building presentations about academic goals, and you're also going to hear intentional relationship goals, and you're going to hear about leadership goals. So those are all things that the district is supporting in PD and these vertical alignment discussions, and trying to get everybody on the same page so that we can make sure our students are successful. All of our students are successful. So thank you.
Jody, kind of a couple of things.
Sure.
First off, could you kind of give a broader explanation of what you see as the 3 critical components?
Okay, well, the 3 critical components we identified, they all have to do with making sure that our teachers are teaching the standards and that we're assessing the standards. We also have a critical component of making sure we use assessments that are aligned to standards. We have 3. Help me out here. Standards, aligned assessments, evidence-based strategies, that we're using evidence-based instructional strategies, and it's hanging on my bulletin board. I think it's just, it's nerves that I can't think of this.
There's no nerves, no pressure.
Of course. She's going to pull it off there and save me.
The effective lesson planning
effective lesson planning, see? And we even have a PD Plus badge about that this year, so you are going to hear about that. But yeah, so those are, what we did was we talked about core instruction, and everybody had a different idea of, well, what is core instruction? So we identified those three things, like if you have really effective core instruction, what's that mean? And those are the three things that we focused on, but now we're seeing that we need to go back and say core instruction, Tier 1 instruction, happens for all students during that 42-minute period, that 43-minute period, that 90-minute period or block. It's what happens for all students, and then when the students don't get that during that time period, then they can go into a Tier 2 or Tier 3 further intervention. But this is the instruction that, you know, that is supposed to be happening, that all kids get.
And then you also kind of explain the Procore assessments, just how they use the kind of nuts and bolts, how they work.
Yep, we just started that this year, so we're all learning together. But Procore is an assessment company, and they're the only assessment company on the approved vendor list for ODE that is aligned to Ohio standards. So there are a lot of test companies out there that align to national standards, but this company is Ohio aligned to Ohio standards. So the way that works, throughout the year, students are given 3 form assessments where they're assessed on all the standards as a whole. So there's a Form A assessment, a Form B assessment, and a Form C assessment. And we just finished our Form A assessment. We had a 2-week window where we were giving a Form A assessment. And that's those standards we want all of our students to be successful on by the end of the year. But you kind of give a baseline assessment at the beginning of the year. That way you can measure growth. We give Form B then around January, and then Form C we'll give in April. So that'll show you how your students grew within that period. But the most exciting part is the short cycle assessments. So every state standard for math, science, social studies, and ELA has questions written for that standard only. And teachers can pull those standards, pull those assessments based on standards, and give those to students to measure where students are on that particular standard. So that piece of it is designed to really guide instruction, because it'll tell teachers who's mastering the standard, who's falling short of mastering the standard, and that can be given multiple times so that you can see growth in that standard. That's a short cycle assessment. It is totally up to the teacher. So it's you know, it's designed so that the assessment company writes between 8 to 12 questions per standard. So when you give a short cycle assessment, you want it to be brief, like under, you know, just a couple of questions to see where they're at. And then you have that question bank to keep going back to, so that you're not asking the same question over and over, and the kids are just memorizing answers, but you can tell exactly where they're at.
And that will be given, that's the bill on their individual.
That is totally up to the teacher. Yes, it's all online. Yeah.
So it's easy to keep track.
And it you know, it's great. It's like an automatic feedback for the teacher, because they can run reports then and see where those students are falling. A lot of great reports that we haven't even really gotten into yet because it's so new, but the report feature is really awesome for data purposes.
Okay. And a student could take that in a few minutes then.
Oh yeah, yeah. Those short cycle assessments are designed to be under 10 minutes. Very, very quick feedback. Yep. Any other questions? All right. Thank you.
Okay. Kenton Elementary, we have Angie Butterman, Robin Bain.
You actually get the pleasure of seeing all of us up here today. We really work as a team, and you'll probably see that in our beautiful building, which some of you were able to see today. I know Friday we were going to have the judging of our pod challenge, where we had the leaders, and you didn't get to come, but
Friday
Mark.
worked. Today didn't work.
Yeah, it did work for
working.
working, but you got to come and present to a class, so that was fun too. But Sheena got to come today, and Mrs. Pensarski. If you do get the chance, please do. We will have some leaders talk to you about the wonderful things that are happening in our building. So it was a lot of fun. The teachers have been working really hard on the pod challenges, so every once in a while we like to get a challenge in there. So we're going to talk a little bit about our building goals. We start with district goal number 1, the personalized academic learning experiences and instructional practices. So I'm just going to piggyback off of what Jody had said, where we're looking at review of the new content standards for science and social studies, and our big focus across the district, and especially in our building as well, is the high-quality core instruction, where we're looking at improving that Tier 1 instruction. When we did go through that process, we looked at what we were doing and said, why do we have all these kids that we're trying to catch up to what we're doing in this Tier 1 and Tier 2? All those words and letters that we use. But it's what we're doing in the main courses that needs to be improved. So if we make that really good core instruction, we'll have a better differentiation of who's not getting it and who needs more instruction from there. So with that, we've learned that we need to improve our process, which is TBT, BLT, and DLT, which sounds like a bunch of words and a sandwich. But our TBT process is each grade level team, and we're fortunate to have, 6, 7, 8 teachers on a team sometimes. They meet together and they decide, sometimes with Procore, what kind of data they need to look at and say, okay, my students are struggling with this. What can we do? So they will choose an instructional strategy to focus on. Last year, we wanted to work on fact fluency, something that our kids needed to really work on, whether it be addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. That was one of the things we intentionally wanted to improve. So all of the teachers in that grade level would find ways that they would improve that fact fluency. So then they'd take that data and go to our BLT, which is our building leadership team. And then we'd analyze that as a team and decide, what kind of instructional strategies, or what did we learn? How can we get better? And then that, in turn, can go to the DLT, which is our district leadership team. And at that point, we will also make decisions on what we can do to improve as a whole. Because if we're doing something that works in 5th grade that maybe middle school or high school could do, we don't want to keep that under our hat. We want to share that. So next, we have multi-tiered systems of support. We have our gifted program, which is differentiated into the classroom. We also have a co-teacher we're piloting in 4th grade. And in co-teaching, we are going to be doing some professional development, and we're going to create and implement an RTI process, which is response to intervention. So if we're talking about increasing core instruction, then we're going to say, okay, so we've increased core instruction. We still have these kiddos that aren't quite getting what we need them to. So we need them to grow in this area. So we might determine that they need help. So we need a team to be a part of that. So we get a team together and say, okay, these kiddos need something else. What is it? So, and we can diagnose that sort of with those kids. And then moving on to assessment, a lot of what Jody said as well. Standards-based grading has been a big deal in our building. We are now up through 4th grade this year. So each grade level, K, 1, 2, 3, and 4, have their own grade card. Which if you've seen them, they have the standards on there. So by the time in the next 2 years, we will have 5th grade added next year and 6th grade. So everyone in our building will have their own grade card. It's a little bit longer, but it has the standard and it tells you how that student did on each one of those standards. So we assess all of those standards individually to tell whether students are meeting the standard, progressing, limited in the standard, or exceeding the standard. So WOCO is is our grading system. They came in and helped us figure out how do we do that, because it's not the normal A, B, C, and D with the percentages. So that's always a good conversation. This year, we'll be working on creating that 5th grade report card. We've been working at it for a couple years, so we're getting better at this process. And then Procore, as Jody had said, is something that we're using as that kind of common assessment piece. We don't have to create it. It's there based on Ohio standards. So we're getting a lot better at aligning things so that we're doing the same thing. We're grading it. We're using Procore. They all look very similar. Procore looks very similar to the AIR test, so kids get comfortable with that as well. Because when they get into 3rd grade, this is their first go-around with online testing. So it's really helpful that they have something that's familiar. And then professional development, again, also in preschool through 2, we are going to be doing lesson planning, effective lesson planning. So they're all working on an online component with EdvisionEd Plus of lesson planning using just direct instruction. 3 and 4 will do that 2nd semester because we're completing our badge from last year, a 30-hour badge, on our standards-based grading. So we're still working on rubrics and things like that. And I think that leads us to Mrs. Botterwood.
Our next goal is aligned to our intentional relationships and engagement. And we have been on a Leader in Me journey for our past 3 years. And we have had professional development around our culture, leadership, and academics at KES. So this year, we're slowing down a bit, and we're going back through our aligning academics. And through that process, we focus on school-wide goal achievement, student-led academics, and empowering instruction. And we do that through a process called 4 disciplines of execution, or we call it 4DX. So the first one is that you focus on your wildly important goals. And if you talk to the kids at the school, you'll see they'll talk to you about their WIGs. So those are their wildly important goals. The second thing that we have to do is act on our lead measures. The third thing is to keep a compelling scoreboard. And the last thing is to create a cadence of accountability. So this year, our school-wide goal, we have 2. We have one focused around leadership, which is our students will demonstrate leadership by leading themselves in habits 1, 2, and 3, which is being proactive, beginning with the end in mind, and putting first things first. And our second one is around academics, and it's that they will achieve their academic growth WIG. So this one is differentiated by grade as well as student. And so each student creates their own academic WIG so that they can accomplish it. And once you accomplish the WIG, you set a new one and you keep going higher. So you never reach an end point. Our student-led academics are, in lieu of the traditional parent-teacher conferences, all of our students participate in student-led conferences where they take ownership in their learning and they share their successes and their future goals with their parents. In addition to this, each student has a leadership notebook, and they have 5 tabs in their leadership notebook. And some of you guys have been in, and the students have shared these with you. But they have a myself, a my WIGs, a my learning, and a my leadership, and most important, my celebrations, because oftentimes we forget to celebrate when we meet those goals. The last thing is empowering instruction, and our grade level WIGs are posted in our pod hallways, and the personal and academic WIGs are documented in each child's leadership notebook. And through this system of accountability, KES, we strive to increase student ownership for learning. Thus, this results in students who work more effectively in teams and become lifelong learners.
So I love the kids taking responsibility for themselves. I think that's a great thing. And how successful is that across the whole student body?
It was our first time doing it last school year, so we started slow. Our coach always tells us to take the crock pot approach, which I'm not really good at because I want to like have it done and do it. And so they started off by only doing their myself tab. And then probably in February, they had their academic wig. And so it was a slow thing that we did last year, and we only practiced it that's one time, and so that's why we wanted to slow down this year and really dive into these so that they're starting from day one, creating their wigs and documenting their progress.
I just think it's a great mindset to try to instill in them.
Well, we will invite you in. You guys are welcome to come in, and the kids love to share their leadership notebooks.
They did a great job today. They did an excellent job. I was very impressed.
Good evening. I am going to look at our Goal 4, which is Comprehensive Systems of Learning Supports. Kenton Elementary School is going to focus on implementing a student success team this year. Our student success team will have two focuses: academic barriers and our non-academic barriers. Our academic barriers we'll be looking at through an intervention assistance team that follows what Jody was talking about. Once we have that Tier 1 instruction, if we still notice students need help academically, we're going to look into Tier 2 and Tier 3 interventions for those students. The second part is our non-academic barriers, and this year we get to add some members to our team. We get to add Greg Stevens from Health Partners of Western Ohio, along with Alicia Cook from Family Resource Center. They're going to help our team with our mental health aspect, with some parenting tips, the non-academic pieces. We're also going to invite Mr. Officer Dan Folk to our team. He is going to be helping with our attendance. We have some students that have barriers getting to school, or possibly getting to school on time, a barrier that they necessarily can't overcome on their own. So bringing Officer Folk in to our team will help us meet with those parents, create plans to help those parents get their students to school on time and to school every day, along with implementing the plans once we have those created. So we're excited to be able to offer this to our students. Again, we'll have non-academic and academic barriers and be able to help them with all of those wraparound services.
Well, I'm appreciative because I let the new guy take the easiest slide here. Because if you've heard a theme throughout what we're doing out there at the elementary school, there's a lot of stuff going on that revolves around leadership. So if you've been in our building and talked with our kids and just heard a common theme, we're really focusing on that. And so when you look at the Leader in Me, preschool through 6th grade, it's a driving force in our school. A lot of what we do revolves around the Leader in Me program. We're instilling those 7 habits in these kiddos very early on. We've done a successful job of creating a culture of shared beliefs and expectations. And so then that funnels up to some of the other things that we're doing with our adults. We have the Hardin County Design Network. It's a pretty interesting concept when you think about Hardin County itself. We've got some pretty small schools in the county, and so this is it's a consortium of sorts of teacher leaders, administrative leaders that are able to collaborate, share ideas together, and really rely on each other or work together with one another. Some of these districts only have one teacher teaching social studies, and so here you're bringing 5 schools in to share what they're doing, which feeds into the Schlechty Design Network. So the Hardin County Design Network is part of this. But we're utilizing the 10 Schlechty design qualities and protocols. Teachers are being better equipped to design engaging work. That is at the heart of improving our district-wide initiative of improving core instruction. And then some of the things that we have around the school for our kiddos, we have the students and adults, so not just for the kiddos, the adult lighthouse teams, giving them multiple opportunities to to be in some sort of leadership capacity. It's pretty exciting this year. We're working on giving kids even more opportunities at our programs, and any opportunity we can give a kid to be present, to help lead, to speak in front of a crowd, just to simply shake somebody's hand. There's just a lot of cool things going on as far as the ideas and the things that our teams are putting together. And then, of course, we have the stakeholder committee, and some of you have had the ability to meet with our stakeholder committee, but it's a pretty special group of kiddos. They're coming together. They're working with not only us as an administrative team, but they're working with community members as well, the Chamber and Business Alliance, really getting into what we're doing with the Leader in Me program. Looking forward to do some pretty cool things with these kiddos this year. As we grow the program, we're going to share it with the community through various projects. And so definitely watch to see what these kids have in store for us this year. There's going to be some pretty exciting stuff coming from this committee.
I really appreciate that Leader in Me program. I mean, that's been really successful. I've seen it. I'm very encouraged by it. We're moving it to the middle school, and your implementation and dedication to that has just been excellent. So keep up the good work. All right. Next, we have Kent Middle School. Kirk Cameron.
Thank you, and I'm going to kind of piggyback on Kitten Elementary and the whole Leader in Me implementation. Ms. Butterman was talking about the crockpot method, and with Leader in Me, I've been kind of like, come on, let's go. We did a book study last year with the grade level teams. This year, we are finally kicking it off and working on staff integration of the 7 habits in their lives. And then next year, we'll kind of be able to get keep moving up that integration process. But it's one of those things where I'd like to be able to snap my fingers and, hey, we're going full tilt, and we're not. You just can't do that. So one of the things that we already had 1 day of training in August, and we get our 2nd day of training in November. So we're excited about that. Our trainer came from Arkansas, I believe, and he's a really dynamic guy, really great training. So I'm looking forward to November. But as we looked at trying to push that Leader in Me envelope and see what we could further our first year's progress, knowing that we were getting kids from the elementary that had some exposure to that, and we didn't want to lose any steam or have to kind of ramp it up again. So one of the things, I've had a Post-it note on my monitor for about 3 years, and I had not had the ability to tackle it, and it was student goals. So when we had the Lighthouse teams or the student teams from the elementary last year, and they were talking about WIGs, there's my envelope right there. So what we're doing every Friday, our activity periods are going to be completing and monitoring an academic WIG each quarter and reset that. And so that's going to be, even though that's not in first year implementation of Leader in Me, that's something that, hey, it got a Post-it note off my monitor, and something that I wanted to do. And at the same time, we're kind of maintaining our momentum as those students are coming from the elementary. So, hearing the elementary talk about all their neat things that their kids are doing kind of makes me salivate a little bit, because I'm ready to kind of grow in our process at Kent Middle School also. My phone went to sleep here. So curricularly, one thing we're changing this year, we're trying to formalize our departmental meetings. We're only a 2-level, grade level building, so kind of when Mr. Blue was talking about you only have 1 language arts teacher, well, yeah, we only have 1 in each grade level for social studies and science. But finding a time where those 2 can talk and make sure that they're on the same page, or 8th grade science could say, hey, you know what, these students aren't grasping this concept when we touched on. I've got to hit that harder in 7th grade. So we're trying to formalize that. One thing we discussed last year as the 7 through 12 math department is that trying to bridge the gap between Kent Middle School and Kent High School and make that stronger. So once a quarter, they are going to be meeting together. So that's one thing that we're changing this year. Our PD Plus course that all staff are working on. when we were looking at our options for this year, we really wanted to kind of push, and it kind of dovetailed with the Leader in Me implementation. So we decided to implement the self-reported grade, student self-assessment, and goal setting. So the staff are working on coursework to help integrate that into instruction, and it just kind of goes hand in hand with our whole Leader in Me implementation. You already heard Ms. Cole speak about Procore. That's something that I'm really excited about this year. Our TBTs, we have 2 grade level and an encore TBT in our building. And we, at the middle school level and then further up, sometimes had difficulty with data that could be brought to the table and discussed, and have someone that's not in that subject area be able to give some meaningful feedback to. I'm excited about Procore on a number of levels, but having some data that teachers can come and say, hey, I'm looking here and 80% of my students don't have adding and subtracting fractions down. You know, I know this is something that we have to work into. It will give us some information to build intervention groups on. It will identify places where students need that help and extra support in, so we can bring them up to grade level. So we're really excited about Procore, but you know, the other component there is that it is very next-gen test built. So it has the drag and drop functions. Everything that they are going to be doing on the state test is in Procore also. So it speaks the same language and aligned to the same standards. So that's something that's new this year that we're really excited about. The last item here is last year was our first year with guided study for students that needed extra help, and we had it for the last 2 periods of the day. And kind of the shortcoming there was students that were in band or choir. The way that our master schedule is put together, they didn't always have that access. So we opened that up and stole some of Mr. Stretch's terminology here with Success Zone. And so we have that 4 periods a day. And so depending on day and student schedule, if they need some extra help on an assignment, there's a spot for them to go. They can get some extra help. The guided study component of it is students are assigned there and can receive some intervention services through that block of time. So it's something that we found to be pretty successful, and it's just a good place for a student to be able to get some help if they need the help. The last thing, and I didn't want to go over one slide, so I have some other items that I kind of wanted to bring up, and that's we have a new guidance counselor this year with Miss Ashley Pruitt, and I was telling Ms. Penzarski today that I'm really impressed with her to this point of the year. She's working on we always do Red Ribbon Week in the fall, so that's something, and she's picking that up and running with it. The other thing that she brought to the table, in November we're going to have Kindness Week, and that's going to be more focusing on the anti-bullying, anti-harassment component to it. So she brought that to the table, and we're going to run with both of those. So we have some neat stuff going on. It's been a great start to a new school year, outside of a couple fog delays. But not saying those were all bad, but
none of them were Mr. Watkins.
but it's been a great start to the year. We're starting Leader in Me, which is something that, you know, it's kind of one of those we've been waiting and waiting and waiting, and guess what? It's finally here. So we're excited about that. So great start to the year, and we're ready for the rest of it.
Super.
Any questions?
Just the Leader in Me, just please work hard in implementation and development and all that, because that's very important to keep that rolling.
It is. And,
yeah.
you know, Ms. Butterman and I kind of had an agreement a number of years ago going to Elgin to look at their implementation. You know, so we're ready to carry the torch now.
Great, great. Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
All right, high school, Chad Thrush.
All right, good news for you guys. The presentations are getting shorter and shorter. Probably be the quickest here. And this is the only slide, but I wanted to go over our 2 main goals. The first one is a relational goal. We had an initiative that we started last year we called the Success Initiative, and there was a lot of components to it, but I'll just save you a lot of that to tell you that it worked. We were able to reduce the number of D's and F's at Kenton High School by 25% over the last 5-year average. So it's not like we just had a better incoming freshman class, or we got rid of a senior class that struggled, or no, this is an initiative that, again, was showing a reduction. And it's not just either, well, we told the teachers to give better grades, because obviously there's that situation, but if you talk to our teachers, they'll say, no, I'm holding to the same standards I held to before, but we've implemented a number of things that have helped kids to be more successful. Now, I can tell you that we came through that on making some mistakes in the past. We looked at things that were more punishment-oriented when kids were getting poor grades, and we found out, guess what? That's not helping motivate our kids. But when we switched and flipped things around a bit and said, you know what? We need to, yes, hold them accountable, but also provide them with the support that they need. That's when we finally started to see kids and especially even our teachers get excited about what's going on and help these kids be successful. So again, there's a lot of components to it, but what I can tell you is that it is working, but we can still improve in some areas. The 2 main areas we want to improve in is our success teams. We have teachers that get together every Monday, and they look at freshmen and sophomores and juniors and seniors, and who are the kids that are still at risk. Even though we're helping them, even though we're supporting them, they're still struggling. What are the things that we can do, maybe completely non-academic, but what are the things that we can do to help those kids be successful? So that's something that we did it last year. We had those meetings, but we didn't have a whole lot of concrete plans coming out of those meetings. And we felt like that's something that we can improve this year, is we want to have concrete plans every time we have a meeting that lists those individual strategies that we're going to try with each kid that we've identified. And then we're going to revisit those the next week, and then we're going to bring new kids on. And we're just going to have a little more tenacity about staying after those students that tend to be some of our most at risk. So that's one of the areas within our success initiative that we want to target. And the other one has to do with advisory time. We had advisory time last year, which just means a short period of time that the kids will work with the teacher on things like setting goals, but also other things like looking at careers and interests and what kind of education it might require if they want to pursue a particular career, that type of thing. But we also realized that we needed to build some things within our culture of our school. So, for example, just want to give you one that's happening next week with homecoming. Typically, Kenton High School's had a great tradition every year of each class makes a banner. Some of you may remember this back from the days that you were in Kenton High School. And then those banners get judged, and there's a lot of competition around those, and that's awesome. It was super fun. But unfortunately, what we were finding was generally just the student council kids were working on those banners, and there wasn't a lot of investment by the rest of the kids. So this year what we decided to do is a homecoming door competition, which other schools have done this, but we decided to implement it at Kenton High School, where every single classroom now is going to be decorating their door for homecoming. Every kid try to get involved as much as possible so that everybody feels a little more ownership in what's going on. That's just one example, but we want to have a lot more of those examples by the time we get to the end of the year. It's helping to build that positive culture where everybody feels like they matter at Kenton High School. So that's the relationship goal. And then the more core instruction goal revolves around what we selected as a strategy that we really want to work on, which is objectives and feedback. Last year we worked on making sure that we were teaching the right things, so looking at standards, and then that we were assessing the right things. Now that we feel like, okay, yes, we're on the right page on that, we want to make sure our kids understand what it is we want them to be learning. Seems like something you would definitely make sure happens, but at the same time, as teachers, sometimes we can get caught up because we know what we're teaching and we know where we're going, but the kids don't. And so this year, one of the first things we did was we gave them blindfolds, and we told teachers to try to get out of a room without giving only but yes and no answers, A's and B's, or A's and, and we kind of tied that in so that they understood with kids, they need more than that. They need more instruction, more feedback, and they need to know what that end goal looks like before we just expect them to get there. And so that's something that we've been working on this year. We started it at the end of last year, but we're pretty excited because we have now a practice profile, which is a fancy word of saying a way that we're all going to try to implement this. That way every teacher is on the same page trying to implement it the same way. And then setting learning progression scales, which are putting it out there for the kid to say, hey, if you're just getting started, this is probably what you know right now, but we want to get you to level 2, and eventually we want to get you to level 3. But helping the kid be more accountable for where do you think you are on that line of things, and then how can you get to that next level. So getting more student ownership of the learning is kind of where we're going with the learning progression scale. So anyway, that's something that we're going to work hard at this year. We started both of those things at the end of last year, but we definitely want to continue and hopefully continue to see the same kind of success that we saw last year. Questions?
Well, I'll just finish things up, and not for Mr. Thrush, but hopefully you see that we've really embraced our vision of inspiring all to inquire, dream, and excel. And one of the things we did do this summer was, go back to the Paul, please, which was to put a directional system in place. And so what that means is that we take every word of our vision, and luckily most of them were verbs, and we defined what that means, so that when we're looking at anything in the district, if it doesn't fit within our paw, if it's not within our grasp, we don't do it. And so the words we defined were inspire, which is a spirit of service and lifelong learning. Inquire is to encourage innovation. Dream is to cultivate curiosity. Excel is to utilize unique talents. And our most important word to us is the all. I think Mr. Albert and Mr. Carmine were with me when we were sitting at the table trying to figure out how we were going to get that out. And so hopefully we've done a decent job with that. But our all is in partnership with students, staff, parents, and community. So this is really important to us. This is our paw. This is what we do, what we believe, and everything that we do needs to fit within our grasp. The second one is we took that it was 11 by 17, probably 12 font that no one ever read, that we spent hours, mostly I spent hours typing and doing, and it just wasn't very friendly, user-friendly. It had all this good stuff on it, but we just never looked at it. So what we've done is created our strategic plan around our 5 goals. And so you can see the goals really clearly and identify. You saw some of the buildings tonight present their goals within what they're doing to show you. Now, the nice thing for board members is, remember that you were shared out a strategic plan tonight where each goal has a folder. So in each folder has all those strategies. Everything that the principals talked about tonight are embedded as action steps within those strategies. So everything they shared with you and lots more is embedded under every goal. So you can see how the district is addressing or how we're moving forward with each of those 5 goals. So that's kind of how everything breaks down and works together. And we'll have these available and we'll post them on our website as well. We're pretty proud of the directional system and the goals.
Great. Okay. Section 5, we're going to move on to. That's public participation section of the Board of Education's agenda, specifically designated for the public to address the board with their compliments, concerns, and/or questions. The board welcomes your comments. If you wish to address the board regarding the problem, the board reminds you of 3 things. First, your comments should be factual and respectful of the rights of others. Second, before coming to the board with a specific problem, you should have first addressed the problem with the appropriate teacher, staff member, or administrator. Third, speakers will be limited to a maximum of 3 minutes. So tonight we have Berkeley Hill. Come on up, Berkeley.
Thank you for this opportunity. I talked to Superintendent Penzarski a few days ago on the phone, and we talked at some length on some matters. My concerns, I read recently in the paper about future consideration of new building for grades 7 through 12, and that's fine. I'm certainly in favor of good facilities and good schools, by all means. But I do a couple of comments. I think, first of all, before we get to the point of building a building and hiring an architect to lay out the building, we need some thorough community involvement and planning as far as where's the building going to be located, access and egress in and out of the building. That's been a problem with the elementary school, and I think we should have learned a few things out of that one there. The access in and out there is not quite the best. Where are we going to put the building? Then the other thing comes about the existing buildings and an overall plan. We're just now finishing. I don't think they're quite complete yet, that new athletic building. Are we going to move away, leave it sitting there on its own? What are we going to do? I think there's some questions and things here that need to be discussed and can get some community input and involvement. Where do we physically want to go? How are we going to adjust our complex? Are we really planning to build a whole new building, a new football field, the whole deal? How far are we going with this? And where are we going with it? We need community involvement. That's one thing in our community as a whole, in my opinion, has been a little short on long-term planning. I won't discuss that any further. Of course, the other issue that comes up, you're talking about cost. Buildings aren't cheap to build. Now, where possible state funding, that's certainly something that we want to be used and be checked out. However, we all know next year, whoever it is, there's going to be a new governor, new administration. You could have some new programs, priorities. Things could change. We would hope it might be better. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. We don't know. I think the situation is not static. Never has been, never will be. At some point, if we're talking about buildings, at some point there's going to be local money needed, levies, financing. Right now, I'm sure we got several years yet to pay off for the elementary building. And let's just say the economy in our area is not the most robust of any place you'd ever go. Levies in the near future might be a little hard to pass. I don't know. I recall we had a levy several years before we built the elementary building to build one at that time that did not pass. And then later, that was one to build a building without state funding, I believe, at that time. That was before that funding deal. Now, hopefully we could get some state funding, whatever we build. But my point is, we need to think further down the line, several years. Where are we going to be 10 years, 20 years from now? The present high school building was built, I believe, in '64. That's been over 50 years ago. A lot of things have changed in 50 years for all of us. And where are we going to be in 20 or 30 years? Where do we want to be, and how do we plan to get there? Like some of the education goals, you got to figure out where you want to go and how you're going to get there. It just don't happen overnight. But we do need, I feel, long-range discussions, planning on overall, not just building the building, but community improvement. And how does it fit into the community? And where are we going to go here? Also, of course, what do we do with the existing buildings? Are they to be disposed of, reconditioned, repurposed? I think one of the things that really hasn't been mentioned here tonight, really, and it's been talked about in many circles, is an increased need for vocational education. There's a definitely shortage of skilled people in industry and all over in Ohio, in this part of Ohio. I think our current involvement with the High Point at the Northwood is a good thing, and I'm certainly in favor of that. But I'd say maybe we need more. Maybe we should convert some other building into more of a vocational center. Back in the, quote, dim, dark ages when I was in high school, we had vocational training of a different type. We had they called it machine shop was the one term for it. We had a farm shop program. Things were different though then. The world was different. We can't go back to that. That wouldn't fit today's world. But we need to think about this. But basically my thought is we got to look into the future further as far as buildings and facilities beyond 3 or 4 years from now as to an overall development. You go around to some of these other communities and you see they've built new facilities, and you can see some of the things that look like it was good. Maybe some things you see, well, I thought they could have done a better job than that. And so you see, I would use the term, some mismatches about the way things are placed and the way they're organized, kind of awkward. So the other thing is, in regard to even to the elementary school today, that Road 114 is an inadequate road. And if we build more back there, it'll become even more inadequate. The road is narrow, It has no shoulders. You have utility poles just a few feet off the edge of pavement. The road was a township road, it still is, and it was never designed for the kind of traffic. I travel that road frequently, and it's simply, the road is not adequate for the needs that's being called to perform today. And if we are to build more back there, there needs to be more than just building the building. We need to build ingress roads, egress roads. We need to have a comprehensive long-range plan on it. Now, as far as designing a building and the rooms and all that, that's a separate chapter altogether. That's not what I'm talking about. But that's really what I wanted to mention, and I think it should be given consideration.
Appreciate that, Berkeley. Appreciate your comments. Thank you. Anybody have any?
Well, Berkeley, I think what you're saying is very true. As we went through the process with the elementary building, there were a lot of formal opportunities to interact with the community, and I think we had a lot of good community input. We also learned a lot going through that process, so certainly informal input from the community is welcome, and then we'll have a lot of, if we get to that point, we'll have a lot of formal opportunities to.
Well, my point is we need to have some of these discussions before we get up to where we were at that time. I know I came to a couple of those sessions here in this building, and at that point you might say the die was cast and all on many things. And we need to have some discussions before we get to that point.
Well, certainly part of that die was cast, I don't know what it was, 10, 15 years ago when the school bought that property for this purpose. And, But yeah, certainly I think that's true. It's a little hard. There is a limit to how much you can decide until you're actually deciding something. That's right. That's a challenge. But and I think resources are definitely a challenge in our community. So as you look at that more comprehensive view, the school board only has a certain realm that we operate in, and we certainly hope we can work together with the other, the county and the city and those entities that comes to play in the issues you're talking about.
Yes, I think, again, I have no quarrels with the school board in any way, but we simply need to have more of a broader community involvement at an earlier stage. As to before we start designing the actual building, we need to have a broader involvement of all these overall factors.
Yeah, we'd certainly welcome that. Yeah.
Just like right now. Now what is now the middle school. Okay, that, of course, we have a football game. Now, the visiting team uses a locker room there. Now, if you have a field way over here and all, what are you going to do there? I mean, they're not going to walk 3 or 4 blocks to the locker room, this type of thing. These are minute, they're details, but they're reality. And are we going to build a whole new football field? Well, that represents also a very large investment. And I would be shocked if we would do that. So that is not my thought. Well, I'd agree with that. But the point is, we need to figure out in a long-range plan. If we're going to use some of the facilities like the football field, how are we going to organize this? This and that, yeah. Thank you.
All right. Thanks a lot. Thanks, Berkeley.
Thank you, Berkeley.
All right, move on to item 6, reports to the treasurer. Approve the following August 31st reports: cash position, check register, receipt ledger, investment report, journal entries, budget versus act. Do I have a motion? Second?
Watkins.
Any discussion? Vote.
Mr. Watkins?
Yes.
Mr. Albert? Yes. Mr. Carmine?
Yes.
Mr. Rush?
Yes.
Ms. Stryker?
Yes.
Okay, item 7, superintendent report.
I did most of mine in the beginning, and hopefully you got a lot from my principals, but if you don't mind, would you be okay if we dismiss them? Most of them have not been home yet today.
It's a free country.
Yeah.
This isn't jail. See ya.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming, guys. I really appreciate
Thank
you coming and sharing all that stuff with us. That was great.
Okay, Berkeley and Don, you guys are welcome too if you want. You don't have to stay. You can if you want. All right. Okay, go on to the board committees. Finance, start off with that.
Yes, it's me. We met Friday?
Yep.
Friday. And so we talked about one thing was getting the final quote to get our former bus garage cleaned up and removed. I think Roger Crate's going to do that. So that'll be a good, it's like the final step in that whole process. So be good to get that wrapped up. We did talk a little bit about the process. We're working through some of the details of the process of looking at building the 712 building. And so kind of just in the stratosphere at this point, looking at some of the tax and the bond issue details that may come into play in the future. We're just kind of really in the preliminary part of that, but the way that funding cycling works is that we do need to move forward with that process, and that's our plan to do that in the coming year. And as Berkeley said, the ultimate input from the community is when they vote for it. So it really is a community decision. It's not a school board decision, because the support comes from the community, and that'll be the ultimate telling of when we move forward or not. We talked about some of our quarterly work sessions we're setting up for the school board to look at finances. One of them, I guess the next one coming up, we're going to look at finances in a little bit farther out kind of way. I guess the other thing we talked about, some of Tracy's strategies to work on some of the issues. How am I supposed to say it?
Budgeting
in the strategic plan. It applied to the strategic plan. Some of the details she's working on to move forward with her part in that strategic plan. So, and make a lot of good progress there. So, I think that's it.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Nope. I think I covered it. Facilities.
That's me, Mark. We did meet this morning, actually. We discussed just kind of putting our mind and our thoughts around what's been going on over the summer. They're trying to wrap some of those things up. One of the first ones we talked about was the athletic building, of course, the new athletic building, that is. How it's coming along, get some updates with that. Progressing a little slow. There's a little bit of concrete left to do, we think, on the outside, but we're waiting on, we need to get some fire alarms, the fire security system put in there, and then we can move forward with some of the stuff on the inside after we get the occupancy. So that was the update on that. The new bus garage, going well there, everything. Doug Comstock said everything's going well. We're getting ready to prepare for winter, obviously, so they did get some tube heating ordered for in there to make sure they've got some heat so they don't have icicles on them, those buses in themselves while they're working. But that is underway and that's been installed. They haven't been installed yet, but they've been ordered. Mark already mentioned about the old building coming down. That should be coming down soon. We're moving forward with that, the old bus garage, I should say, with that. We talked about we're having a little bit of problems with some of the compressors in the elementary school that we're going to try to get with the manufacturers and see if we can get some of the compressors are going out on us every once in a while. We want to get that updated, make sure that we're on the right path with those.
Which is it's still a warranty.
A warranty,
issue,
yeah, they're still under warranty.
So,
yeah.
They've been kind of a reliability issue, but they're still covered by the original warranty.
Yeah, absolutely. And then one of the other things that surprised me is we've got a couple openings for full-time maintenance supervisor. Is that right?
Correct. We're
Maintenance
looking
supervisor
for a second shift.
and second shift. Yeah, and then there's a second shift floater as well available. So if you know any good candidates, have them sign up. And that was it for that, Mark.
Okay, good. I think extracurricular met. So Career Center.
Nothing to report.
No update there. And so Doug. We're back to me.
Back to me.
Sorry.
That's all right. We actually, the policy committee did meet just before our meeting here tonight, and we just kind of decided that we're going to be updating some outdated policies coming forward here, moving forward in the next 3 or 4 months. We'll have those out, talk about and get those updated, some things that we'll need to do.
Okay. Sounds good. All right, no old business. On to new business. 10A through 10K personnel items. Motion to accept.
Carmine?
Carmine, and
Yes.
second.
Stryker.
Stryker. Any discussion? If no, vote.
Mr. Carmine?
Yes.
Mr. Rush?
Yes.
Ms. Stryker?
Yes.
Mr. Watkins?
Yes.
Mr. Albert?
Okay, item 11, authorizations and resolutions, 11A through 11D. Do I have a motion to accept?
Watkins.
Do I have a second?
Carmine?
Carmine? Any discussion?
11D might look the scariest, probably, but that's just when Dr. Smith came and talked with us and asked if we would pass the resolution to support High Point Board to stay the way that it is now. I think, and there's some shared service agreements. There will probably be a couple more of those coming as they come in from other boards.
Okay. All righty.
I have a question about the appropriations list. I was kind of breezing through there, and
Yep.
there's a line for hockey. What's
Hockey?
that? It said hockey. I swear it said hockey.
I didn't see it either.
I probably just full of beans. I don't know.
I don't know. I don't have hockey.
Maybe I'm just hokey.
You'll look through this and you find it for me.
All right, a challenge. We can move forward.
All right.
I'm not doing a small amount of.
All right, we'll vote.
Mr. Rush?
Yes.
Ms. Stryker?
Yes.
Mr. Watkins?
Yes.
Mr. Albert? Mr. Carmine?
Yes.
Okay, adjournment, 8:05. Next regular board meeting will be held on October 15th, 2018, at 7 o'clock.
Maybe some of our reports, they moved them.
Still in the right row?